Avengers!
Welcome back to another.
Sorry.
Welcome back.
All right. Silence.
Welcome back to another dang it, my braces. Welcome back to a Joshless episode of Talking Smack. This week I have with me Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much. And we have Lewis. How are you doing, Lewis?
Doing good. How you doing? Hey, who are you, by the way?
Oh, I'm Alex. Oh, that's
There you
right. Shit. Starting over. All right. Nah, crap. We're already 35 seconds in. All right. Yes, this is Alex. It's a Joshless episode. I'm going to warn everyone ahead of time. Yes, this is a Joshless episode with me. Alex is the host. That does not mean Justin from the Movie Wire podcast is co-hosting like normal, but we do have a promo for him. So let's cut to our promo. Please listen to Justin. He's fantastic.
He's on the run from the law, falsely accused of murdering his... Wait. Oh, got my scripts mixed up here. Here we go. This makes more sense. The Movie Wire Podcast with host Justin Henson. Hear Justin's movie verdict wherever you listen to podcasts. Tune in to The Movie Wire today.
So this week we're going to talk about Last of Us, the HBO series that is a spin-off, remake, live-action adaptation of the critically acclaimed, culturally important video game from Sony's PlayStation platforms. Before we go into just the entirety of spoilers, I mean, the game is over 10 years old at this point. It has been remastered. It has been made for the PS3, was remastered for the PS4 within like a week, ported to the PS5, remastered for the PS5, and is out on PC. If you hadn't had a chance to play it, too bad.
Shame on you.
Exactly. I mean, heck, it had a sequel that came out 3 years ago. So, let's hear the ratings. As you know, on Talking Smack, it is either the greatest thing in the world, so you must watch, or it's a pass because it's complete garbage and should burn in eternal hellfire. Luis, what do you think of the show?
The show is absolutely the greatest thing in the world, and honestly, that's the end of the podcast, so you should go watch it. So, good night, everybody.
You don't even need to hear what I think. I'm glad I could be here. I'll see you guys later.
All right, Matt, just for posterity's sake, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I dug it quite a bit, and you know, I'm as someone who has played and enjoyed the games, I'd give it a watch.
All right, and for me, I just finished watching it about 45 minutes ago, and I will say I haven't had time to digest. Yeah, it's good. You should watch it. It is perhaps the best example we have of an adaptation of video game to movie. I mean, to TV. The only barely passing the 90s Super Mario Brothers movie.
Just barely, though.
Barely.
Just barely. But we're talking marginally.
Yeah. Bob Haskins, John Leguizamo, how can this show do better? Just barely did.
We're going to get into it. We're going to tell you how.
You're right. Like Sonic movies got nothing on this. The new Mario movie, whatever. Like,
all right. And with that, for a 10-year-old game and a 72-year-old 72-hour-old TV show.
Finale.
10-year-old TV show.
70. That's right. We're now reviewing every episode of I Love Lucy from beginning to end.
With Ellie played by Lucille Ball.
Exactly. And Pedro Pascal is Ricky.
Joel.
All right. Spoilers from here on out. All right, Matt. There's really no way to describe this thing without just... I don't know. Tell me your feelings.
Yeah, it's I imagine we'll get into more of them, but you mentioned that it's probably the best or most successful video game adaptation to date, which I think true. Although I will say that the game itself was already pretty cinematic to begin with. So like, if it almost sort of feels like it didn't have that much work to do, which sounds reductive, but I don't mean it to be. But there's like certain sequences, certain shots in the show over the course of these 9 episodes that are pulled almost like directly shot for shot from the
Yep.
game. So like, it's interesting. We're like, we were joking about Super Mario Brothers, but that's a case where success or failure, greatest movie of all time, they're pulling from like much less of a source material. So like, it really is a wonderful. Um, I don't want to say I was gonna say achievement. I don't know. It's a great show, but it's working from a lot of like really solid source material too. I was very skeptical of it going in just because there's sometimes with these big cinematic games, you sort of get the sense that Hollywood is like, oh, finally one of these we can take seriously and
Right.
do something with. And I was like, I mean, the game is great at its own. It's already basically a movie that you play. Why not just let it be? But the cast is great. The way that they've adapted it is great. Like the changes,
What they've added to it.
what they've added to it, yeah, the tweaks and to the tweaks and expansions. I don't want to say are for the better, but they are definitely enhancing what's there for this specific medium. Um, so yeah, I'm sort of biased because I already loved the game, but I just think it's great.
Pretty much, I gotta agree with all of that. It's a love letter to be sure, but it's not just a love letter with bias thrown into it and not done in a way that is adapted well and portrayed well for TV watching. It's got all the beats down for proper episode lengths. What is it, 290 episodes, and the rest are about an hour-ish, if not a little bit less. But yeah, the shot for shot stuff was great because the first game for me was memorable as all hell. So like I still had vividly, some of these episodes, I think especially the first two, where they walk right in front of the school. They walk outside by the they're looking at the horizon of the city. That's almost shot for shot, almost word for word delivery. Maybe not the same exactly, but those pieces were important and created such a character in the game that I'm glad that they brought it back as faithfully as possible in their own way. And it's just, it does not mean anything for those who haven't played the game, but it's meaningful for those who have played the game, and for those of us who've been in the medium of gaming for so damn long. And yes, this is definitely not the first game that's been given a good treatment to adaptation. Look, there's been others that have gotten really good and gotten real close. And yes, I'll give it to them. They did a great job of this one being like the de facto, but just the way that they put it together gave, I think, and me being a longtime nerd, longtime gamer, it gave it's almost like acceptance. Like finally, like we've done our stupid selves, our genre, our mediums has been noted and has it can be seen now. This how many people do you guys know that you wanted to share The Last of Us to, but they would never ever do it because they don't play games and they look down on it, or they don't think they have the mental capacity or the hand-eye coordination, so they never play it. They don't even want to sit down and watch you play because they get bored during the gameplay sequences. They just want to watch the cutscenes. Like now they've got to finally experience this thing, and that is what makes me the happiest out of this damn thing.
Yeah, come a long way since Pac-Man, baby.
Yeah.
I had hopes that they could do it right if they had the right person interpret it. The game made a lot of effort to make Joel and Ellie have substance even when they're just walking. I loved replaying the game and looking for all the little prompts that you could trigger, and Ellie would pull out her pun book and start telling jokes to him just out of nowhere. If you like stood in the right spot or you idled long enough, she'd start telling him jokes.
Yep.
Sometimes when they're traveling, she would make commentary on the windows, and you could get these extra little moments of them together with her asking him questions or just reacting to an environment she's never seen. they did that really well in the game, in the TV show. I think they had a great foundation to work with. They also weren't constricted by the idea that a video game has to be a movie, which I think is very important because we've like the Tomb Raider games have good stories, but when you slam it together in 2 hours, it doesn't really work. There's no nuance. There's no room to breathe.
Yep.
The newest Tomb Raider from 5 years ago, I was watching that trailer and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, this is based on the reboot. I played this game. Yeah, that's the sequence where this happens. That's the sequence when this happens. Okay, cool. And it was just they thought that they thought the way to adapt the video game to a movie was smash the action sequences together and let's hope for the best. To a lesser extent, the Sonic games have really worked, but that's because Sonic doesn't really have a story and it's more just about the love of it.
Don't say that. You're gonna get the Sonic lore people on us.
Oh yeah.
I like the Sonic movies. They're fun as hell.
There's story in there,
Yeah.
but like it's nothing. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
just
But
it's
yeah.
yeah. Don't
Well,
do it.
I think that raises an interesting point because I think something that maybe you're getting at this, maybe I'm extrapolating it, but I think a lot of video game adaptations sort of feel like they're trying to do the story, but they're also sort of trying to cram in the stuff from the game that people like from the game, right? Where like the thing that comes to my mind is like the first person segments in the Doom movie.
Oh yeah.
Where like, but this weirdly enough, The Last of Us succeeds mostly by stripping all that gameplay stuff out, you know?
And then that way they can be more nuanced into the storytelling and kind of piece it and weave it almost
Yeah,
perfectly.
yeah. So it's like, you know, they're only able to do that Bill and Frank episode 3,
Mm-hmm.
because they decide not to do the long sequence where in the game, Ellie and Joel meet Bill and he's like an old paranoid man and they have to go do a bunch of shit in the school and it's mostly just collecting things and killing enemies and stuff.
Yep.
And there's a big boss fight. Yeah, it's really weird to think about. Where like they took the game out, and then that's how they got the best game adaptation.
Well, yeah, and it makes perfect sense. Except back to the Bill and Frank episode. Like that was just a sequence of them like we need to find a battery and we need to find a truck.
Yep.
And we need to go, and it's just traversing and traversing and traversing, and then we find the battery and let's go. Where like, you know, for film that's maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Tops. So yeah, you can build on this background, on this past that leads to that final moment, but you can tell an amazing story of how people dealt with the world crumbling around them. I thought that was freaking
And I
beautiful.
think something it also does is it makes those, because in the game, right? So in the final episode, there's a whole sequence where like Joel basically becomes a mass shooter for a brief period.
Yep.
Where like in the game, that's not unusual. Like that's the gameplay for the most part, is you are like either fighting like raiders or you're fighting the infected or whatever
Constantly.
Yeah, but because that so much of that has been taken out of this story, those moments of violence where like Ellie kills somebody or like Joel tortures somebody, they become, I think, much more impactful because it's not the gameplay loop, you know.
Yep.
It's not the thing that you've been doing for the last 15 hours between the cutscenes. So it's really interesting as an adaptation in that way.
At the same time, I will say that I think we needed 1 or 2 more episodes because it did seem to feel as if we were at points watching a cutscene of a video game.
Sure.
You were moving; it was moving pretty quickly from one point to the next. Like I felt like the last 3 episodes were just way too quick. They finally got to Tommy's in episode 6, and then they just blaze through. Oh yeah, cool. We're hanging out here for like half an hour to watch a bit of a movie, and then Joe gets in trouble. They do the Left Behind episode, which is fantastic, and then very quickly they're back on the road again, and episode 9.
Yeah.
But I felt like I needed a little bit more in parts of it because in the game it never seems that you arrive anywhere in the game without having to battle your way through infected to then get to people who may or may not be trying to eat you.
Sure.
And in this one, it seems like there's just entire swaths of episodes where there's just no infected or clickers at all, except for maybe like they'll see one or a corpse, and I felt like that looming threat seemed to just kind of vanish as the story shifted to it is humanity which is the true evil in the world.
That's kind
Um,
of true of the story of The Last of Us in itself. I mean, the
yeah,
personally the clickers and the infected, that was just like sprinkling some seasoning onto the whole story. Really, it's let's look at the last of these. I get it. Let's look at the last of these people left on Earth, how they're surviving in the post-apocalyptic era, and then also, hey, here's some infected situation going on. They're zombies, but not zombies. But like they're there when they happen to be there. So I don't know. I thought that was playing on a part
Yeah, and
pretty perfectly
I do
myself.
I do think that that's just part of zombie fiction too, right? We're like, this is effectively it's a zombie story, and The Walking Dead's a great example of this. There's the famous thing from the comic where Rick Grimes is like, "We are the Walking Dead," and the point is, we are the monsters. Like, that's just a theme that comes up in a lot of at least
Right.
modern zombie fiction.
Right.
I think the thing where I most noticed that, Alex, is in the finale episode, right? Where in the game, there's that sequence where Ellie goes through this ordeal with the cannibals
Hmm.
mm-hmm,
and has to kill this guy, kills him brutally, and then is traumatized by that.
yep,
And then by the end of the game, she's kind of come out of her shell again, and Joel and her have like fully connected.
Right.
Um, in the game, there are long gameplay sequences in between those 2 points that are like helping bridge the time, helping
Hmm.
pass, explain that months are passing by. And then also there's that sort of banter, and it gives those sequences room to breathe.
exactly. Like because he even says, "Oh, you're extra quiet today," which suggests that either it's been a day, or this is a pattern that's been happening for maybe like a week or so. I mean, yes, we went from the snow um, to Salt Lake, which apparently early spring, summer, or something like that. But there wasn't enough time to really breathe, like you said, breathe. I wanted a little more spacing in between things, just like so that I knew what was really going on. Like, are there clickers in the middle of the country as they're walking, as they're moving from place to place? What is happening with the world other than these little pockets of just of blandness and terribleness?
Yeah, you kind of wonder if they could have done an episode that is just more of an action episode or something, in between those two episodes, or even another departure episode that's like, what's Tommy up to? What's Marlene up to?
Not even departure, I would say, but more like even on the final episode, just slap an extra 30 minutes to
Sure.
convey that path from, getting out of Cannibal City, and then making your way, whether by montage or like short snippets of like, this is what we did. Because truly in the game, from there to the final point, there's really not a lot going on. It's literally just like, we are traversing, we are surviving, and look, we made it. Here's a giraffe scene. Is practically what happened. So there's really, if you look at the game to what happened to get to the final point, really there wasn't a lot. So I can understand why they did what they did, because there wasn't a lot narrative to go from there except for the buildup of more connecting between Joel and Ellie and all.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know that it's necessarily a fault with the show. Like, I don't think it's like I. It's something I noticed. I don't know if I know that it is necessarily bad. It's just a consequence, I think, of just basically stripping the story down to the studs, where we're losing the bits where we're sneaking around and like collecting tape and scissors and shit.
Yeah, I mean it's funny you guys notice that part where I thought what the part that kind of took me out of all these episodes, the only part that took me out of it a little bit was Joel's rampage. Like I love what they did with it as far as like they muted the sound, everything got foggy to kind of show Joel's fog. He is just absolutely zoned in on what he has to do. Take Ellie back. Let's get out of here. So he just doesn't care. Most people down. Somebody puts his gun down, puts his hands up. He's like, nope, don't care. Bang. And it's all just fogged music, fogged sound. So I thought they conveyed that very well, but we've never seen the one man show that is Joel in this show. We've never seen him be the Call of Duty one man hero. So it felt a little out of place for me. And like maybe if he took down maybe 6 dudes, and then got to Ellie and then skedaddled out of there. We don't know how big the Fireflies were in this location for the small situation was going on here, but instead it looked like he took out a small militia. Um, and that's in the game, yeah, absolutely.
Oh
But
no no,
again,
my wife started counting. 18.
well, exactly, yeah, a small militia. Which again, as far as those watching the show, I was like, when did Joel ever become this badass? Like, yes, he has a love for Ellie. It's it's the conveying of Ellie is what, Sarah, right? Ellie is Sarah and Sarah's Ellie. So like we get that's the driving force, but at the end of the day, like that's what put me off. That's the part that felt more speedy.
Yeah, I can see that. It is definitely the bit that feels most like, I think this is something that people have said about. I've seen people say this about the series, not necessarily as a criticism, just an observation, which I don't fully agree with. Where it's like, oh, the thing where they're going from town to town and meeting another set of people every couple episodes is what it feels like we're going through video game levels. I don't agree with that. And anyway, the only time that I've felt like that criticism might be valid is during that sequence, because that is the sequence where I was like, oh, this feels like
A
Joel is
video
now
game.
playing a video game.
Yep.
And it's kind of the opposite end of what I was saying before about the violence, right? Where it doesn't feel as out of place in a game where this is a normal thing, where you're going through these stages and taking out 5, 10, 15 enemies of varying configurations. But here, where the violence is present but less so, where it's much more one-on-one or small groups, this this sequence where it basically is him taking a rifle and mowing down an entire hospital, that's I think the most, it's impactful, but it's also the most discordant sequence, where you're like you were saying, oh, we knew this guy was violent, that he was willing to do horrible things. I guess we didn't realize that he was also, on on SEAL Team 6. you know?
Well, the part that bothers me most about that is that so they arrive back. Marlene's there, and she had agreed to give him whatever he wanted, and then she doesn't pay him. At least she could have offered like a token payment or something. Instead, she's like, take him out there, give him his bag. If he so much as twitches, kill him. It's like, okay, so now you know what you're taking from him. You know what he's can do and what he's saying. You're threatening him with violence. You're not giving him at least his payment to say, hey, listen, we're settled up. And then, he goes on his rampage, gets Ellie. They show them in. She pulls a gun on him in the car park, basement parking lot, whatever. And she straight up tells him, "I'll never stop coming for her. No one will stop coming for her." Blah blah blah. And then she's asking for pity,
Yep.
and he's like, "You said you're not gonna stop."
Right. Exactly. Bang.
It's such an interesting
Yeah.
sequence, because like it's a sequence where, and I guess this is true of the game to some extent too, but literally everyone is wrong. Like,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
you're gonna take this girl's brain out of her head without saying
Not
anything
telling
to
her.
her. I know that, like, the American Medical Association doesn't exist anymore. Major HIPAA violation.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Maybe it's what you should do, I think, is if there's any question of how this dude will react to hearing that, like, the person he spent the better part of a year with got her brain scooped out, you do it and then you tell him, because then it's done.
Yes. I was thinking that would have been a perfect Ozymandias moment.
Yeah.
What are you talking about, Joel? We killed her 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. And like, also Joel, for his part, should not have gone on a rampage. Should have at least asked Ellie what she wanted first.
Yeah.
But, everyone in there is like, no one in there is taking Ellie's agency into account.
No,
So
no, not at all.
there's two more things I want to discuss before we wrap this up. One, we'll talk about like, did we enjoy things they added that weren't in the show? But to me, the most important part of the show was going to be, did they have the giraffe moment, and did they end on the same beat that they ended the game on?
Dude, I was so happy about that, dude.
Which
Like
one, the
the
giraffe or
the
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 ending?
the very last scene. Like I
Okay.
even sitting down watching with my wife last night. I knew the pause, the moment, waited for the nod, just like in the game, and I even cheesy moment, I know, but I literally spoke the okay along with Ellie right as she said it. And I was so happy about that. If they wouldn't have, I would have been like, nope, I'm gonna flip a table.
Well, it's interesting to me just because when we were going into this season, and I don't know if they said as much beforehand. I didn't, I was kind of keeping up with the promotional material, but I wasn't like reading interviews. But I was like, I was not sure if they were even going to do the entire first game in one season. If they were going to find somewhere in there to break on a cliffhanger and do it in two or something. So it is, but and it makes sense that they did it this way because it is a complete story in and of itself. But I think when you get to the end of end of the game, end of that story, those are the two moments you need to nail, and they did. And one of the
And they
ways they
did,
did
yeah.
it, I think that last scene was one of the ones where, like, if you were to sync it up with any version of the game, it's probably almost
On
shot for
point.
shot.
Mm-hmm.
If not exactly, they're saying them on the same cues or whatever, but the way the shots are composed, the way the pause before she
Yep.
answers, stuff
Yep.
like that.
The nod before she answers, like
Yeah,
everything was right almost
I would bet there are
to
pretty
a
much one
second.
for one,
Yeah.
which I think they did throughout the series, but they really reserved it for like the most important scenes.
Yep.
So it's really going to live and die based on the cast,
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
they nailed it. Like the chemistry
Yep.
between Pedro Pascal as Joel and Bella Ramsey as Ellie is like perfect, right?
Oh
It's
yeah.
not they're not just channeling Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, but they're embodying the characters in slightly different ways, but it's that they're still gelling the same way, and
Yep.
it was really something to see. And speaking of those two, Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, who played them in the game, it was also very cool throughout the season to see, like, oh, you're dropping in cameos and bit
Yep.
parts for
Yeah, for
the
all these
various,
people who were in the game. Yeah,
yeah,
I
which
was
is
about to
very
say the
cool to
same
see.
thing. Yep.
Yeah.
That was super cool. I like, oh, let's touch on that. And I hate that it's about the whole season and yet we're focusing a lot on the final episode. But I like the addition that they did to explain when the flashback scene with their mother. Yeah, that it explains a lot. They didn't go crazy about an explanation, some weird thing. It's just like, no, it was right, right as she was coming out, right as she was bit, and right as she cut the umbilical cord. It's almost like there's a word for it. What is it? George Washington vaccinated his people by injecting them with the actual thing, and then they
Oh,
got.
sure. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the word, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the word either, but essentially is what it was. Essentially, as a half-ass vaccination, and thus she was born with the immunity, which I thought was pretty freaking awesome.
It's interesting because I think that's, for me, just personally, I thought that was a really wonderful scene. Like the whole sequence, like Ashley Johnson is great in that sequence. Really nice little like full circle thing where she's playing Ellie's mom, and it also plays into the themes of that specific episode and also the greater season about you know parental love and stuff like that. The only thing I might have changed is that I would not have made it as explicit because I don't think I never really cared about answering that question. But if they were going to do it, that's like the best way to do it, right? Where it's like it's a thing
Yeah,
happens, it's clear what that implies, but it's not a whole thing where someone is like, "Oh my," and that's why she's immune. Very well done sequence. That is, it's not just about that. It's doing other things. It's working in layers. So like you could lose that bit entirely, and it would still be a very important
Yeah, absolutely.
sequence for the episode. Yeah.
Absolutely, but then we also built on Marlene being close to Ellie, and also her having that thing to fight about, to understand with Joel when she lays it out with Joel, like, no, I
Yeah.
understand what I'm doing, and I fucking hate this, but this is like for the greater good type of situation. Even though I still didn't tell her what we were about to do is
Yeah.
crack open her head and kill her for the greater good. So. So yeah, it was a wonderful scene, a wonderful addition to the whole thing. It didn't need to be there, but it didn't take anything away from it.
Did some changes by adding backstory to how it was spread and stuff like that. There was an extended sequence at the beginning of the second one. Joel, I believe, explains to Ellie, is it episode 3? He explains that, it would have been in the major like foodstuffs that get stocked on the shelves on Thursdays and Fridays, so the week,
Yeah.
the whole world falls on a weekend.
Yep. Yep.
The Bill and Frank, just that 25-minute section, episode 3 was just beautifully done. It was such a wonderful change. The only thing I really didn't like that they changed or added was actually in the first episode.
Really.
I liked them building up Sarah, like a day in the life of her. I liked that part, but to me, one of the most memorable sequences in the game is you are Sarah in the car, and you're able to just move around the car while Joel and Tommy are talking,
Mm-hmm.
and you can look out the window. If you're not looking out the right window, you don't see kind of stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And it's such the way they show her moving, the way like she touches the window, she grips the seat, all these little things are happening that you as the player are controlling and manipulating. I loved that, and they kind of stripped that back to have this action sequence that includes a plane falling from the sky and exploding like like 100 feet away and causing this car accident, this other stuff. That's the beginning was so, it lost me a bit because of the change from small world, I'm a child in a car, to large world, ex- planes falling from the sky, entire town being looted, and all that stuff. That's really the only change I didn't really agree with them.
Well, it's an interesting point because I hadn't considered that when I watched that episode. And part of it is by the necessity of the medium, right? Where you're no longer in control of where the character is looking or where the camera is. But that is a sequence where you are in control of this young girl that has no idea what's happening. So I can definitely see where you're coming from there, even though that didn't stand out to me. Um,
I mean, most of it worked. I don't mind the backstory being explained. I didn't mind Ellie's mom being the most badass woman alive to be literally give birth while stabbing something to death. I mean,
Right. Right.
that's so badass.
well, I think some of those changes are like some of the best things. There's that extended sequence in the second episode that opens the second episode that is just about this woman, possibly the one person in the world who is best equipped to know what's coming, just like realizing how fucked everything is.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And it, not in the game, totally outside the scope of the game's view, but just like such a wonderful and harrowing sequence. And like even that opening in the first episode where it is kind of like on the nose, but it's like this interview from the 60s on TV.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just like, here's the theme of the show. Like, we are making sure you understand what we are trying to do before
Yep.
we do it.
Yep.
But it's still like just a nice, like well-written scene. And then, the whole first episode which we're talking about, aside from any of the changes once we get into game mode, is really just about like doubling down on what some of that stuff in the game does early on, where it's trying to make you feel who this young girl is before they take her away. But this is like, they're just doubling down on that, right? Where the whole first episode mostly is the last day in this girl's life, the last day anything is normal, just like seeing how it plays out, and just like,
Since we're wrapping this up, since we haven't really touched on episodes 4 and 5 at all with Henry and Sam,
Oof. Oof.
I will
Oof,
say that
Henry and Sam.
Kathleen, the actress Melanie Linsky, I have only known her from Two and a Half Men, where she plays like the nutsy neighbor
yeah,
who was in love with Charlie. I loved her in this.
Yeah, and that's another great change, right? Because I think in the game it's really just like zombies and like faceless soldiers, right? But
Mm-hmm.
here we're like doing it we're doing it slightly differently, and like we're
Mhm.
putting a face to this character who doesn't get a ton of screen time, but what we get from her really tells you this is who this person is, and
Yep.
like everyone else in the show, she's not a good person, and she's very
She
complex. She's
she did
understandable, but also shitty.
such a good job
Yeah.
that I wanted to punch her like so bad. Like she did a good
Yeah.
job of portraying this character that just is not a good person, and it's I mean yeah, flawed and issues and this and that, but you wanted to just shut her up.
And I think that's also maybe the biggest action set piece of maybe this season, which is also really solid. I think the only that's another bit where I was like, oh, this is kind of video gamey because there's a boss. But otherwise, like, it's a really wonderful, chaotic sequence that I think could have felt much more artificial than it was, because we're recreating the thing where like in the game, you're sniping from the roof while chaos is breaking loose. But I think the way they played it was really strong. Yeah.
Yeah, and Sam and Henry though, oh my god, like that was another scene that I was not looking for. Let's be straight up. Like episode 1, crying like a child. Episode 3, crying like a child with the Bill and Frank stuff. Sam and Henry is another moment that I didn't want to live through again, and they fucking nailed it. Again, another one that was almost shot for shot in that last scene. The change to Sam being deaf was another change that wasn't in the game, but like they did it very well and added so much more to it. Especially seeing Sam and Ellie freaking just bonding, and Ellie having fun as a young teenager, still a child essentially, with this other child. Like, god damn, like just thinking about it just almost wells me up just talking about it.
Some of it is recency bias because I watched the finale last night as of this recording, but also that how good the rest of the season was. That like, we're talking about all these standout moments as well as some nitpicks, but then also there's like this entire other wonderful, harrowing 2 episodes in there that we just almost forgot about. Yeah, and one thing that reminds me of one thing I wanted to mention, just because like the HBO Max dropped a like a half-hour making of thing along with the finale, and my wife and I watched it tonight. It's definitely worth your time.
All right, so we're gonna wrap things up.
A quick question: has
Yeah.
Josh played The Last of Us?
No, I don't think so.
Oh my gosh, I don't think so.
Fuck.
It's a shame that he's not here, because I was curious to get his
Yeah.
perspective as someone who hasn't played it, because I think
I was sitting here going like, I don't think he ever played this thing.
I know he doesn't like scary movies and games, so I don't think he's actually played The Last of Us.
we'll make a gamer out of him yet.
No. I actually don't want him to play. I want to hear his. All right, we need an addendum episode. We need an addendum episode.
We'll do a bonus episode when life isn't eating his face.
Yeah, so he's not a clicker.
How does Josh feel about buff women in video games?
How does Josh feel about misery porn?
Right.
And our music and our theme song this week will be played by I don't know. I gave up that shtick a few episodes ago. I think 80 is long enough. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Have a good night.
Matt, say your stupid thing so I can hit stop.
Watch Star Trek.
Thank you. Even though Josh is not here, you can follow him at Josh_Scar. You can follow us at Talking Smack Pod. You can join our Discord at tsmackpod@gmail.com. That is also where you can email us. Thank you to Leo Allen for our musical themes, and Beppo and Retro L Studios for our Apple bars. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us,